What's up, my house plant lovers and hoes? So, are you propagating a monstera in water and you're tired of it rotting out once you transfer it over to soil? Stick around with me, and I'm getting ready to show y'all exactly what to do so that you can have propagation success with your monstera. All right, so what we are going to need first and foremost is going to be a plant that has been propagated in water and, of course, has these water roots. Now, if you look closely at these roots, what you will notice is they have sort of spidered out a little bit. So, this is the main root here, but then from that main root have come lots of little tiny roots. That is a good sign that you are ready to go ahead and start up the process of transitioning over to water. You do not want to let the primary root, the big one, grow and then create lots and lots and lots of secondary roots, because if there's a whole bunch of them secondary roots, then the plant is really going to be thoroughly adapted to growing in water, which will make the transition a lot harder. All right, so we're going to jump into the most important part that we have to know about making sure that transition as we move forward from dealing with a plant that has adapted to growing in water to having it adjust to and being well fit for living in soil. We know that, for example, this plant here, Monstera, is a plant that's going to enjoy a well-draining soil. It doesn't want to sit in soil that is too wet, because this is a plant that is a hemiepiphyte. Hemiepiphyte meaning that it grows both into the ground to start, but then it grows up the side of a tree. As you can imagine, the side of a tree doesn't have no damn soil on it, so the roots are not made to be constantly wet. They can adapt, right? But we are taking them out of water and adapting them to a dry substrate. The big part of that is making sure that we create a substrate that's going to be good for this plant, right? So we have big pieces of amendments in here, like this leca that you see, which will make the soil more chunky, which will make it more airy, and will kind of simulate the plant actually being on a tree. If you look here, you can also see we got some tree bark in there. But the big part of it is the soil that I have in between here is going to be peat moss. That is the main amendment of this, because peat moss holds a certain amount of moisture. So these big giant chunks of stuff like this are going to create a situation where the water just runs right through. It doesn't hold itself in the pot and create a situation where bacteria can grow, the roots can be drowned for oxygen, and then the plant starts to rot, right? This is going to allow that water to drain out fast, but then the peat moss is going to allow the soil to actually maintain a little bit of moisture. The big thing is going to be balance. So the next part here, we're going to go ahead, get us a pot that's big enough. This is a nursery pot because this is not a plant that I'm going to keep. So I have this nursery pot here, and I'm just going to, of course, line the bottom of this with this soil the way we normally would. And I need to put on a mask. Let me go get a mask because this is dusty. All right, if you're dealing with soil and you notice that it's all types of dust and shit floating around, please go put on a damn mask. Don't breathe that shit in, especially when that dust is coming from stuff like perlite. And also for me, I actually use Damascus earth in my soil, and that's not good to breathe in to your lungs. All right, so we got a good little base going in here. You're going to fill this pot up about halfway, because in this situation, we want this plant to grow into the pot. So just get enough soil in here. And this dust, as I said, flying every damn where. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we are going to take our plant, and in this case, with the Monstera, we want to make sure that we pay attention to how we put it in the pot. Looking at this plant, there is a back and a front of your Monstera. You want to decide which way is forward and put all your plants in there the same way. This area back here where all of the nodes and the roots are, the nodes are what will attach to poles and trees and so on and so forth, and where a new plant will grow if you were to cut it. We want to make sure that the back of this plant is all facing the same way. So in this situation, I know that this is the back. We're going to place this in the pot with the back in the same spot for all three of these plants. Because if you have three plants and they're all facing different directions, it's going to look really, really crazy as your plant grows. And that's not what you want. So in this situation, we see we got these big ass roots here. And got to get them in there without breaking them up too much. Right? So we got that in there. And then we have a third plant where technically I would recommend only putting two plants in one pot. But in this situation, we're going to go ahead and break the rules and do three. Here's the third plant. I'm going to put it down in here with its roots facing the back of the pot, just like the rest of the plant, right? Now, all of the plants in this pot are facing the same direction. That's going to be important because your display will be ugly as hell if you have a plant and it's all facing different directions. I got shit. I got this sliding all over the place. This plant is big and it's knocking the camera. Leave the camera alone. Yeah. Okay. So now what we're going to do is get in here and fill in this space, right? Fill it in. Fill that thing in, baby. And we're not going to fill this soil all the way up to the top. Because we don't need it. Okay. Make sure you get it in the front and the back. And what will eventually happen too is I will put this plant on a moss pole. And the moss pole will help to make sure that this is stable and not falling around in this pot. Now to pull this higher up into the pot, you can literally just pull up and shake up on the plant. Just kind of jiggle it up and let some of that soil fall in between those roots and also let the plant lift up in the pot. The big thing is we do not want to create a situation where there's a massive amount of soil down at the bottom that's empty, has no roots in it. That's what I mean when I say empty. And then most of the roots are up towards the top. Now, because of this plant specifically, it's going to grow really, really fast. So you really ain't got to worry too much about not having a whole bunch of empty space that has no roots in it. But in this situation, we're going to make sure. Okay? So, as you look here, the roots are covered, right? They're completely and totally covered with soil. We started our transition. All right, so we got our plant potted up. And here's the most important part as you move through the first 1 to 2 weeks of this plant transitioning. Now, this is the water that this plant was actually propagating in. It already has the nutrients and everything in it. What I am going to do is saturate this soil in this pot completely. The way I'm going to do that is by literally just sitting it down into that bucket of water. Of course, you can pour water over the top of your plant. Whatever you got to do to get your plant saturated is what we are trying to do. So what's happening is this is actually going to just soak up the water that is in that bucket into this actual soil. So it's going to be drenched way more than what you would normally allow this plant to be drenched. But what it's going to do is create an environment that is just a little bit different, but also very familiar to this plant. That way, the adjustment is not too drastic. What will happen is, as that water begins to dry off, the plant is slowly acclimating to being in that soil. So we're going to start out with soaked soil, completely and totally drenched. And then as that soil starts to dry down a little bit, over time, we are slowly transitioning our plant to adapting to soil. So what we do not want to do with this is go directly from water, go directly into a dry medium that's just kind of moist the way that it normally would be when you water it. We're going to go directly into soil that is saturated, and we'll leave it for a week. In this case, this is a big pot, so it's going to dry out a lot slower. The big thing is you're going to want to make sure that you keep it moist. It'll start out saturated. As you move through the process, it's just keeping it moist. You're not going to want to keep it saturated long term, because then what will happen is your plant will start to rot out. Okay, so I hope this has helped you guys. Even though this is a monstera, this applies to any plant that you are adapting to an actual substrate from water. You want to kind of transition it in slowly and allow your plant to acclimate. If you like the information that your ass got here today from Plant Daddy, make sure that you hit that notification bell and subscribe to the channel. It don't cost you nothing to support me, and if y'all want me to keep coming back and doing this, it's gonna need to be a reason why. All right, all y'all got to do is thank me later. I holla.